This episode of the Media Leader podcast was edited by our production partner Trisonic. And if you're looking for podcast production support, we highly recommend them. Find them at trisonic.co.uk.
As an industry, it is quite intense. And I feel a bit like actually the expectations that are placed on individuals with little support historically are gone.
Hello and welcome to the Media Leader podcast. This is Omar Oakes. Today I'm joined by Paddy Affleck. Paddy is UK CEO of Havas Media Group and one of the winners of the Media Leaders Awards' 2024 Grand-Prix. We run these awards because it's part of our ambition to promote values of disruption, inclusion, courage and excellence in media and advertising. And as we'll get into our conversation today, Paddy is one of those people in the industry who certainly aims to walk the walk when it comes to inclusion and courage in particular. His personal story is quite different from your average media agency CEO, and that is why, among other things, he's known as someone who likes to challenge conventional ways of thinking about this business. So, hello, Paddy. Where does the Media Leader podcast find you?
Hi there, Omar. Really pleased to be joining today. So today I'm in Havas's offices, the lovely Havas Village, London, in King's Cross. I can actually see out the window today. We've got slightly bright skies for us today, so it's actually nice to be in here and excited to be sharing my story with you. I know you and I caught up a few weeks back, and there are certain things that I think have absolutely shaped me as a leader, which I'm quite excited to sort of delve into a bit more today as we go through it.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a sunny day in London today, cold but sunny as it is when we're recording in November at this time of year. And I want to ask you, you're right next door to Google's ever-evolving building, supertanker building. What's that? You can obviously see this from your window, can't you, at Havas? I mean, how's it looking? Have they built it yet?
It's almost there. And every time I ask anyone from Google, when are we going to see the end of this building works? I said, next year. Supposedly it is going to be the summer of next year. It's going to be done. But it's interesting. I've now been here for 4 years. And I remember coming to this office for the first time in the sort of the middle of 2020. And you could still see St. Paul's through the right-hand side of our building. You can no longer see St. Paul's. You can just see this behemoth in our way. But I think there is a running track, or at least that's the rumor, on the top of the building. So at least we just get to see loads of Google engineers running about. But yes, that is supposedly what's going to be happening. And from what I understand, predominantly engineering that's all going to be in that building is the rumor, but we'll wait and see.
Incredible. For anyone who hasn't been in King's Cross in London for quite a while, you want to walk out the station and walk towards the Guardian's office, and it will take you quite a while to walk the length of this new Google building. It's incredible. I remember your predecessor's predecessor, Paul Frampton, actually kind of showing me the new Havas office as it was, and even building work was beginning then on that building. That was a long time ago. But you, Paddy, you joined Havas Media as the UK CEO in July 2020 from Dentsu, where you spent 12 years in a variety of positions and agency brands. You've got over 20 years experience in the industry. Over that time, you've obviously won our award for Media Agency Leader of the Year in the summer. Tell our audience, what kind of leader would you say that you are?
I think it's interesting. As you're right, I've been in the industry now since end of 2020. And I'll talk a bit more in a moment, a little bit about how I kind of got into the industry. But if I think a bit about some of my qualities, I think the first thing, and I think certainly the story and the transformation that we've been on in terms of Havas Media Network sort of reflects, I guess, my approach to doing business. And I guess the first thing is this idea of being progressive. I think right now, as an industry, and for those that work closely with me or know me, I think I'm always looking at ways in which we can constantly evolve the business, our practices, because I think it's important to demonstrate that we're not just standing still. I think sometimes you can get into a bit of a danger of looking too inward within your own organization. But if you're not constantly aware of the sort of ever-evolving needs of our clients, of their customers and their consumers, you risk the danger of just becoming a little bit unstuck and a little bit stale. And I think this idea of having a very progressive mindset is really important, because also by being progressive, not only can you transform quicker, but it also allows you just to constantly remain quite challenging and curious about the ways in which you do things. Like, I've always worked in a digital background. I've come up through digital, and I'll talk a bit more about that a bit later. But equally, I started to see how, of course, that medium, that technology was ever evolving, giving rise to so many new opportunities, and which required our agencies to quickly change. And I think, I will constantly look at the way in which we're set up and go, right, how we might be today, it's not really going to be how we might look tomorrow, because actually those things might not still be relevant to what we are required to do. And I don't know, I think, there are some people perhaps that are a bit more resistant to change. I think I kind of embrace it. I think it's really important to look at change, look at actually how you can drive positive change for your organization, for your people, embrace it and find a way and take risks to move forward quickly. I do think that's really, really important. I think, if we were to talk about me, if you were to ask somebody else a question, I do think, I am quite entrepreneurial and innovative. I used to carry one of those ridiculous titles, Omar, in the day of like global head of innovation
Wow.
when I was at Dentsu. But really, my job wasn't about just trying to find, those little sort of things that you just get a little bit of industry coverage because you've done the media first in this particular platform or taken advice of this opportunity. I was doing it in a way in which, is there a better way of us to be doing things? Is there a better way for our clients to connect with their consumers? And I always strive to try and do that and try and look for a better way. And then I think the other part really about me as a leader, and then you and I have spoken a bit about this before, is, I talk about the idea of Havas Media Network being a force for good. And I genuinely do feel that I am a responsible leader. I do think, the communication industry, my industry that I'm responsible for, my agency that I'm responsible for, has a huge amount of positive influence over the way in which we conduct our own business, positive influence over the way in which we can also shape the way in which brands behave and the way that consumers react and respond to that in terms of their own consumption behaviors. And I think we owe it to actually try and establish much more ethical, sustainable practices. So I'm a sort of a socially conscious, I guess, type of leader as well. And I think it's really, really important that we are making positive changes and differences to the way that we behave as an organization. So I think those are some of the sort of key qualities I would say about me as a leader.
Yeah, I think that really resonates with younger generations, upcoming generations of the people working in this industry. Really feel that they take a much more lateral view of advertising as communications and what advertising can achieve in terms of socially progressive causes. I mean, people do struggle with, an ad agency having certain clients which might not obviously conform with those objectives. If you want to make the world more equitable, more sustainable, in previous episode, your boss Yannick Bolloré, I spoke to him about Shell and taking on that as a media account, and he was very strong about having principles in place in which you can have a client like that, a fossil fuel producing client, and lead it towards a more sustainable path. I mean, how do you think with a client like that, when people come up to you and they might have private concerns, what would you say to them about that?
I mean, I think one of the things is, as an organization, we remain true to a lot of the practices that we've been trying to put in place over the last few years. And I'm actually immensely proud of a lot of the initiatives and the work streams that we've done, the relationships we've got with the likes of the purpose disruptors, the things that we've properly embraced, programs like initiatives like Change the Brief, that truly are a demonstration that the work that we're trying to do for our clients has more integrity and more credibility to it. And I think the worst thing in those situations where there was, of course, a lot of negative attention around that, as you are well aware, and you spoke to Yannick before about that. But I think what we need to demonstrate is actually we are making positive change. We are doing a lot of these things that are actually advising our clients in the right way. But then we ourselves as our business are actually demonstrating that we remain committed to a lot of these programs and that we are actually making progress against our own science-based targets. And I think so long as you're demonstrating that actually we are trying to influence all of our clients in the right way and we are making positive progress against that, it demonstrates that there is still absolute credibility and integrity to that position. And I stand by that. And I think, we've had very open conversations as a business with our people around that. And I think it's important to constantly demonstrate that we are moving in the right way.
And does that bring the pressure of needing to demonstrate tangible results of how you might have changed a Shell's business?
I think whether or not it's Shell or more broadly any client that we work with, I think what we are trying to do is just actually much more align ourselves with truly aligned agendas around promoting better practices within media. That we are actually demonstrating that together we are more lined up around what our combined sustainability agendas with our clients, and that we are then over communicating the progress that we're making against that. And I think it's important to not shy away from those things, but constantly be vocal about it.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned sustainability. So we're speaking a week after the US general election, and I think it's fair to say that sustainability didn't come up very much in that campaign, which I find personally hugely disappointing. When you talk about being mindful of progressive issues, I mean, let's get back from the start. How did you get into this industry? How did those values that you have now, how did those get shaped?
I have a kind of an interesting background and also where I grew up. So I actually grew up in a place called Pilston Community. So when I was 2 years old, my dad sort of moved the family down to Dorset, and sort of picture this if you can. So like it was a community that was set up in the late 50s. My dad took it over in the 80s, early 80s. So I went down there with my two older brothers, my parents, and essentially this place was established as a way of, I guess, creating an environment where anyone felt that actually they were safe, they were welcome within that place, almost as a place where they could actually come and I guess try and refine some sort of inner strength. So these were people that were often met with, they could have had health issues, they could have had some crises that had affected their life that had almost taken them off the beaten track, as it were. It could be stress related, alcohol, or other addictions they might have suffered, and they were recovering from that. And this place was established where people essentially would come and live, and they would spend time with one another, where there was a genuine feeling of acceptance. So all of these people from different types of backgrounds, different types of religions, different socioeconomic backgrounds, all lived together within this environment in Dorset. And what was really interesting about it is it did give people genuine strength, because this idea of acceptance, there was no criticism, there was no stigma, there was no negative associations with people's backgrounds and how they'd found themselves at Pilston. But what was quite interesting, and growing up as a child within that environment all the way up until I was 16, so formative years, we talk about this idea of mental health, well-being, neurodiversity, or cognitive diversity. And I grew up in an environment where I was constantly surrounded with people that had different types of struggles. And I think as a leader, I watched the fact that in terms of what that means for me today and how it might have shaped me, the reason why I think it shaped me in a positive way is I've watched people that have come to an environment, and actually as a result of feeling that they were a place where they weren't being judged, they were being made to feel secure. They were also made to feel that they had a purpose again. So the way that it was run, everyone had different roles to play within the community. So like, picture this, we had farm animals, we had a little dairy, we had big gardens, all this other stuff. Everyone was given a different role to play within the organization and the community, so you feel that you were contributing in a positive way. But I thought what was really, really nice about it is, it was very open. You had different people, like I said, with different backgrounds, different stories that were constantly shared. And it was really fascinating growing up with that environment, because, of course, I would acutely listen to people's stories and backgrounds. There was one guy, for example, that used to hang out with the Craze back in the days. You've had other people that were ex-musicians. There were all these people with very fascinating stories. And I just got very fascinated by the human condition and what drives people's motivations and their behaviors and who they are. Like I said, those were my formative years growing up. And I think if you were to talk to me a bit about the type of person I am, like, I don't stigmatize. I don't talk enough probably about my upbringing, how it's actually shaped me. But what's quite interesting a bit about it is, it has led me to think a bit about people and actually how different types of people from different types of background can actually generally work together in effective harmony with one another. And I saw it firsthand as a kid growing up. I then ended up going off and doing a psychology degree. I did briefly want to did graphic design. I went to Chelsea Art College, did a graphic design degree foundation, because I thought I was going to get into advertising through that route, because I was always kind of interested in the advertising space. Ended up doing a psychology degree instead, and then sort of worked my way into the industry from that point. But the starting point generally always was one of just a bit of a fascination of understanding society and human behavior. And then sort of I fell into the industry, interestingly, back in 2000. So October 2000, left Manchester University and started working for a startup as my first job called letsbuyit.com, which for some of your listeners might know what this is. Others that are younger probably won't, but it was the idea of it had these little ants in the TV ad, if anyone remembers this. And it was the more that people came together to buy a product, the cheaper it would become. So if 20 people wanted to buy a television because they're buying it in bulk, it brings the overall cost down. It was called co-buying at the time. But in 2000, no one was really buying online. So we had offices all over Europe, big designs. This was going to be massive. And then, of course, the bubble burst at the end of 2000 and businesses like that went down the pan. It's interesting that business models like that have repeated themselves, Groupon and some of the others, that type of idea. I then went into a research company, another startup called Net Usability that interestingly was invested in by a joint venture between Aegis at the time and Warburg Pincus called eVerger. And this is a really interesting business. It was like all about sort of usability and understanding how people would use different types of websites and interfaces. And it was quite interesting. You could ask them different questions when you were asking them to do particular tasks on a website, like add this to basket, and you could watch what they were doing and then go, why did you do this? So again, it was quite qualitative research. Again, a lot of my psychology background was beneficial into that. But then I eventually started moving properly into the agency world around about 2004 and went into Z Media back in the day. So actually, interestingly, Greg Grimmer was at that time, or about sort of 6 months after I joined Z, became the MD of Z Media. But they were a really, really fascinating digital media agency. We were kind of like the digital arm of Zenith Optimedia at the time. And so I worked within that environment. And I was always sort of the guy initially that was properly looking at how digital would ultimately transform the way that clients think about media and advertising. And so did a lot of work with really exciting brands back then, the likes of P&G and BMW, and sort of then moved more into a role at that point where I was trying to sort of almost educate the wider planning community of Zenith on the merits of digital. And that's before then I went and worked in Aegis, actually, ironically, after the Aegis Warburg Pincus investment into net usability many years before, and joined into Invisium, always in sort of a digital remit. But it was a really interesting, I was in Dentsu Aegis for 12 and a half, 13 years, but it was working in a group that took me into global roles. And I think anyone working within the industry, getting exposed to other cultures and working in global roles versus just purely domestic was a fascinating eye-opener. It was a job that took me all around the world, working with different offices, different clients, but it then actually moved me to the States. So I actually lived in the States for 3.5 years. And interestingly, the first time I was there, two things happened. One was Brexit, and I was mocked by my colleagues who I then said, well, just wait, in about 3 months' time, you're going to vote in Trump. And then, of course, they voted in Trump. So I was there in that first wave of the Trump administration. But I've been back, and I came back to the UK, and I was back in the UK for literally about 18 months, took the Havas job, and then the pandemic happened. So it's been an interesting journey up to this point. But I would argue that, a lot of my qualities going back to your original question as a leader, I would say have been shaped a lot by how I grew up and how I approach things, and why I believe that, I need to use my influence in a positive way, because I think actually, I grew up in an environment where I was witness to that.
Yeah, I do think that is one of the fascinating things about media and advertising, is that you said it yourself. It's a role I sort of fell into at first. Most people say that. The vast majority of people say that, and I think that actually is a hidden strength of the industry, because people don't come into it with preconceptions. They just come to do a job, but they think they might be good at it for the short term. Let's see where it goes, and they start adapting to it. And even when you adapt to kind of these massive things that happen, like a Trump getting elected or a Brexit happening, people in this industry are perhaps better at adapting to big shocks than maybe other sectors. Do you think that adaptability, would you say that's necessary to be a good leader?
I think it's hugely important. I think adaptability is a good word for it. I think actually, I've never really met an industry that has to constantly adapt and transform itself. I think the expectations that our clients have of their agency partners, like, why are they employing an agency? They're employing an agency because they believe that agency possesses certain qualities, certain skills, certain capabilities that can help them overcome or circumnavigate different challenges or move their business forward in the right way. And I think that's a really exciting position. But for us to constantly be able to add value to our clients and make sure that we can remain relevant to that, we need to constantly adapt and evolve our own models, right? And I think if I look at the journey that I've been on within Havas Media Network over the last 4 years, and particularly initially coming out of the pandemic, where you had a lot of clients, that were pulling back on spend, that were concerned about where their business or how their business was going to build back quickly from the ill effects of the pandemic. Actually, we also had to reflect as well on terms of like, are we set up appropriately? Do we have the right types of skill sets to aid our clients' next stage of their transformation? And I think all the things that we've been doing over the last few years, why we've been acquiring certain businesses with certain types of capabilities, particularly in the data, tech, performance space, is because actually we needed to help our clients grow back quicker and faster and to aid them on the next stage of their transformation so that they could be more sustainable businesses for the future. And so, do you know what? It's been a hugely exciting thing. But if I just sat still and we hadn't done some of those things and we can continue to operating in the old world of just the way that media agencies have always behaved, I think, there was a danger that actually we would be seen as less of a value from our clients and less as a strategic partner to our clients. And I think that's hugely important, that your clients as well see you as an agency that is a genuine advisor to them, because ultimately you become more valuable to them moving forward. But it does require you as a leader to constantly look and reassess how you're structured, how you're set up, to make sure that actually, if you're honest with yourselves, are you really delivering against your expanding and growing needs of your clients? And indeed, are you working with your partners to unlock new opportunities appropriately? And if you're not constantly challenging yourself, experimenting or adapting or being super flexible to that change, you do risk the danger of being left behind.
Yeah.
And I think, we have genuinely been on, and this isn't just like a genuine plug and promotion of Havas here, but I do think actually I'm really proud of what we've been trying to build, because we've been adapting ourselves, because we've been listening acutely to the needs of our clients. And I think as a result of that, our retention speaks for itself. We are winning more clients off the back of it. Our organic growth story is a strong one. But it's all been done about us acutely listening and not being afraid to change our model. And that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, I want to get into that on what makes Havas Media different in a bit more detail. But on the more general points about being adaptable, and you mentioned your upbringing, and on a commune, we describe it as a commune. The organisation.
Yeah, it was called Pilsner Community.
Yeah. So kind of that sense of kind of seeing people from different backgrounds and different challenges that they were facing in their lives. We hear so much talk about mental health and how to provide better support for people with mental health challenges in the industry today. Is there something generally that you see that people get wrong, or is there a warning for leaders in terms of how they deal with these issues that maybe the industry could really benefit from improving?
I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I think, we as a business, and I know a lot of other businesses and agencies as well are trying to establish better practices that allow people to achieve genuine work-life balance. We've got a program that we've just launched, another program called Havas Minds, which is all really about not just helping our individual employees understand some of those signals where things actually might be becoming overwhelming, stress might be actually on the rise, which ultimately will have a detrimental effect on your mental health if left unchecked. So it's not only for individuals to understand that, but also for management and their line managers and other people to understand that as well. Because I think, as an industry, it is quite intense. I'm just now speaking on behalf of the advertising and media industry. It can be quite intense at times. And I think every time, old practices, perhaps we're never challenged enough. And I feel a bit like actually the expectations that are placed on individuals with little support historically are gone. And I think what we now need to do is understand actually what are we doing to ensure that we are properly supporting our people, that we are properly listening and evolving our business to ensure that actually we are creating an environment that, yes, of course, allows them to thrive within their careers and develop appropriately, but never to the detriment of them as people and to them in terms of their own mental health. And I think the only thing I would ever say to anyone listening to this, or if I talk to anyone, is just making sure that we don't accidentally fall trap of just like going, it's a box ticking exercise. Yes, we get full X amount of days doing this, or we're doing this particular program. We've got to listen and we've got to constantly adapt ourselves to ensure that actually we are ensuring that people within our environment feel that they are being invested in, that we care about their well-being, and that actually in the instances where they do need our support, we are giving them the appropriate support so that they can actually feel stronger and they can adapt themselves and they don't feel such a position where they feel at a loss without support. And I think that is something that we are genuinely as a business massively leaning into and spending a lot of time speaking to our employees, setting up things like ERGs to understand some of these finer details and issues, that as a leadership and a collection of businesses, that we have consistent programs to support our people. But it can't be top down, Omar. You have to spend time speaking to your employee base, understanding what some of those pain points are within your business that I might not even know exist. But if we don't have these conversations, if we don't surface these appropriately, if we don't tackle it together, it can be things that over time could spiral out of control. And I think generally as a business, we are pretty open. I think we've got very open forms of dialogue. We created things like an employee experience group, which is about trying to constantly listen and surface some of these pertinent things to ensure that we can create initiatives that have absolute maximum effect and impact, not things that just tick boxes, because that's not what we're about. And I think we are making some positive inroads, but I do think more needs to be done. And you can see it in the agenda within our industry at the moment. There's much more talk around mental health. There is much more talk around well-being. And it's a good thing that we are talking about it more. And I think, again, going back to my own upbringing, what I witnessed was an environment where people surfaced what was happening in their lives. They spoke about it with one another, and it actually made them stronger when you confronted that. The last thing we can do is hide these issues or stigmatize any of this or consider about the fact that actually, it's generational differences or divides. People just don't work as hard as they used to. It's just kind of a nonsense. It's just perhaps the old way of doing things. We just never actually addressed it. And now we are. So I just think we need to keep moving it forward. But I'm pleased with the position we're taking on it. I'm sure we could do things that are better, but I think programs like Havas Minds are a demonstration of our commitment to it.
Yeah, you only need to look at the literature going back 100 years or even further than that, where you hear commentators talking about the feckless youth. how some managers speak today is definitely nothing new.
It's very easy to do that.
Yeah. And I think I hear what you say on it can't just be a top-down approach as well. I've never worked in an ad agency or a media agency, but I've worked very hard this year in my own role as a journalist and a content creator and a manager to be more mindful of how I support myself from a mental health point of view. So it's difficult when you have competing responsibilities where part-time content creator, part-time manager, part-time doing other things, and you have to work really hard at compartmentalizing your time. I think it could be really stressful when people are trying to reach you in online environments, group chats and an email, and people need something quickly, but you're kind of head down busy doing a project. And that disconnect between the different roles that we have to wear, the different hats we have to wear, as well as an online environment where we can't see each other. We're recording this conversation online. At least we can see each other while we're speaking, but very often people are just throwing words at each other, and it's just human nature to always to not respond as well as you would in a face-to-face setting. So there's all sorts of hurdles that we need to work through.
You're right. We also need to demonstrate the fact that we are trying to find that right balance ourselves as individuals and as a team as well. So that question that sometimes I ask, like, what do you do individually to actually ensure that you're looking after your own well-being and mental health? Like you, I'm a dad of, I've got 3 small children, and I try and find space and time, and I try and sort of like do things where actually I can give my utmost attention and focus to those individuals and try and find different techniques where I can actually try and wind down myself. Because also, if I can start to actually try and put those behaviors in place and establish those behaviors within my own sort of life and routine, actually, it's easier for other people to see, well, he can do it and the leadership team to do it. Well, obviously, they want us to actually try and actually operate in a way that we're much more balanced in terms of our work and personal life. But if I'm creating false expectations where we're putting too much pressure and overwhelming people and speaking to them out of hours and all this other stuff, we're not creating the right conditions, are we, for them to really believe any of this is credible at all? So I'm also really, really cognizant of the fact that, that I need to demonstrate that I am actually also caring about my own well-being as all of this as well. Do you know what I mean? Because you're trying to set a direction for other people to follow. And I'm always remembering about my daughter at the end of the day. It's like, Daddy, you do have a family too and everything else. I think it's a good wake-up call sometimes, just to be reminded.
Yes. But yeah, you are still a media agency CEO. So you mentioned Havas Minds, among other things. So a lot of criticism is leveled at the network agencies for being too similar to each other, and you all do the same thing, you all look the same, sound the same. So how do you respond to that, whether it's in a pitch or talking to anyone else? What makes Havas Media different?
That's a good question, and I think there was a quote around. So it was all to do with like the pitching within the UK, where all of the agencies throughout the process make all these attempts to say that they're completely different from one another. When it comes to the end of the pitch, you will ultimately remain the same. And I think actually, as a business here within the media network, I think Havas has been a very, very interesting journey over the last 4 years. Like I mentioned, I think we have been making some smart choices in terms of investing into new capabilities. We've also been bringing in some brilliant new talent. More recently, it was recently announced that Emma Withington is going to be joining us soon from Omnicom. Emily Fairhead-Keane has just recently joined us. We've got a wealth of new talent also been joining the organization. And I actually feel that a combination of those things, brilliant talent and capabilities, but being able to make sure that clients can properly realize the potential of those things. We make it very easily for them to access those things. We're being an agency that can actually properly demonstrate that we are there to help them genuinely solve problems. I think is something that actually a lot of our clients are now seeing something that is, really, really exciting, and that fact that it really resonates with them, that we're not just an agency that is all about, reducing media prices or the lowest common denominator in that regard. We are an agency that is very confident in our position, but is an agency that can generally be a strategic advisor and a partner to them as they seek to grow and evolve their own organizations. If I was a client working with an agency that actually has a confident position and can be assertive in their own position around a direction or a strategy that we believe can generally help them versus taking something which is more subservient, I know which agency I'd choose. And there are certain types of clients that, that with that sort of challenger mindset that we will want to work with, because we believe that we've got the right type of culture, the right type of talent, the right type of environment, the right type of experience to really work with businesses like that to move them forward. Not every client will want to work with Havas, but we're working with some really exciting clients at the moment. And I generally think the thing that sets us apart is the way in which we are able to break down the barriers from our own organization. We remove any frictions. We make it very easy for them to access the type of talent and capabilities that they require to help them solve their challenges. And I think that is something that, like back to my earlier point, has really, really helped us retain our clients and to help with a lot of the new wins that we've had this year, because we are very confident in the recommendations we're making, because it's very much framed in actually how we can help our clients grow or overcome the challenges that they've posed to us. We won't shy away from doing that sort of stuff or being fairly assertive in our strategies and our positions that we put forward to them. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that culture and that environment. We've got people like that that can put forward those types of recommendations to clients, and clients are excited about what we can do to partner with them in doing that. And And that, I think, actually makes us quite an entrepreneurial, a different type of agency business. And I think it's one that actually creates a really exciting culture as well for all of our employees here.
And how do you see not just your agency, but more generally the future of media agencies developing? Is it going to be less planning and buying of advertising? Is it going to be, everyone's looking at how to integrate more AI tools into their business? Somebody said to me last week, just imagine the future in which you're a client and you can just have a dashboard, and you can just say, I want to reach these audiences, and here's my brand assets, and it will just spit out a media plan and a whole a never-ending list of creative ads to go with your general parameters. I mean, how do you see the future of media agencies developing in the emerging world?
Yeah, look, there is no doubt that, if we look at the way that we operate as organizations, increasingly more and more media, of course, is being bought through digital channels. And of course, there are increasing ways for us to get smarter with that, data-driven creativity that delivers greater personalization at scale, increasingly more and more things being automated, delivered to particular audiences. Of course, more and more of that is going to be powered by things like AI and through automation. There's no denying that. And already, as an industry, of course, we've already been doing that. But I think if you think a bit about the future of everything in the future is just all about being AI generated and delivered, I think we're going to miss a trick. And I think actually, what do agencies bring? And I think also this is true of media agencies. Actually, we bring a really interesting way of actually tackling challenges. When you combine, human thinking and creativity with the machine ultimately in AI, I think there is where magic can really, really happen. If you rely too heavily on, the future of everything being completely AI generated and delivered and powered in the future, you've got, what's that phrase? Everything is working towards the mean, and everything is the risk of danger of becoming quite generic, right? Because it's just going to optimize itself in that way. And so I think when we talk about what we do in Havas, and when you spoke to Yannick and you saw him talk about our future of our converged strategy, we talk a bit about the fact that, of course, more and more of what we do across media, creative, production, and technology will be delivered increasingly through AI and all these other things. But actually, it's also the power of creativity. And actually, that's when it becomes really, really exciting, is how you can combine creativity from what we do with a lot of the stuff that we do around the technology and data to actually just drive greater scale to what we do. And so I think actually, as a business and at Havas and what we're trying to do, I think actually placing more and more emphasis on understanding people, understanding essentially how we can actually get closer to the individuals, create new types of experiences that they want to connect with. Yes, some of that will be delivered ultimately through machines, through greater automation, through more data-driven approaches and so forth. But what we're really trying to do is actually try and find better ways to connect with people, to build better relationships and connections with for the longer term. Because if you look at the new generation, your kids, my kids, look at the way in which they're interacting with digital and technology. It's just part of their life. It's just ubiquitous. And I think actually at the moment, we've got to almost remove technology from the equation and go back to an understanding of how do we actually find better ways in which brands can build better relationships and connections with an individual, with a group, with an audience in a given context at a given time. And that is what advertising always sought to do, and media's always sought to do. It's now we can just deliver it with greater efficiency and effectiveness. But really what we want to do is actually, if we can take a lot away of those sort of administrative, those mundane tasks, and it allows us to have more time to think more strategically about how we can actually build better relationships with people, create new and exciting experiences that ultimately connect with them. That's a really exciting space, because actually AI or the other thing will take away a lot of the stuff that actually is causing inefficiencies in our workflow. That's what I'm excited a bit about, is how do you actually remove some of that from what we do day to day so we can focus on some of the higher value, more strategic, more creative parts of our job that can truly help our clients connect their brands more effectively with the people that they want to connect with. And that's where I'm excited about where we're going. And our whole converged strategy that we're trying to go down is, yes, we're investing significantly in data and technology stacks to power the work that we do. But really what we're trying to do is create much more joined up and exciting experiences that combine all of these various channels to deliver new types of experiences for our clients and their customers. That's a hugely exciting space to be in. And, and a lot of our investments today have been about that. And I think our journey is very much started, but it certainly hasn't ended. And we're going to continue to invest in new things, but also continue to invest in people that can actually really drive much bigger and more exciting creative ideas. And I think investing in that type of skill set is going to be hugely important as well moving forward. Because otherwise, if going back to it, if we relied everything on AI, everything would be the same. So I think it's important to invest in those areas.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just to finish the point on this, I think we really moved to an era where a lot more people in this industry are really more aware of the creative and, dare I say, emotional response opportunities of the digital age, where everyone, is gone past thinking about targeting and audiences and targeting the hell out of things, and now actually realizing that it's quite intimate when consumers are kind of alone with their smartphone, whether on the commutes, whether they're at home, wherever they may be. It's such a different conversation when not just content creators, brands, but anyone is communicating to someone via a smartphone, particularly when they've got their headphones. And the internet has given us access to the world's information for free, essentially, a lot of it. Actually, it's the power of communicating with someone in that intimate space, which is why people enjoy podcasts, which is why, going back to the US election where, you saw Trump and Harris go really, they call it the podcast election, because that huge campaign, they did far more podcast interviews than ever before relative to TV interviews. And so we're really seeing different sorts of things happening. And I think there are all sorts of opportunities for communication to be more interesting, more emotionally led. What the flip side of that, of course, is the potential for disinformation. I don't want to get into that as a whole other conversation. But I agree, in terms of being interesting, exciting, and opening up new avenues of communication, I think people should be really excited.
Yeah, and my final point on that one is it's a bit like, you and I go to the pub and we'll talk about different topics and we'll have a conversation generally as people. And I think sometimes, in the age of where the media industry went about 5 to 10 years ago, we got obsessed with this idea of precision of targeting. We can find any individual wherever they are. We can remarket the hell out of them. And we lost focus. We lost focus because we stopped thinking about people as people, about what are their interests, what are their motivations, what is the context in which we're wanting to talk to them. Actually might mean that they behave differently in that particular point than they would if you spoke to them at another time. And I think right now, we can't lose sight of that. I think, AI and all these other things can actually surface some quite interesting insights, but we've got to interpret that into more meaningful solutions, more meaningful bits of content, more meaningful experiences that connect with them on a genuine human level. And I think that's what I think we need to get back to a little bit and get away with. We can all use data in smart ways to target an individual that looks a bit like this individual. But what are we actually saying to them? What are we actually trying to get them to do? What are we doing to actually enhance that experience at that given point? And I think that, to me, is still a major motivator of who we are. And, when you see all these brilliant awards and campaigns that are breaking, you go like, love that. The simplicity of the way in which that's been able to connect with individual on a personal level makes me really excited about this industry. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. And I think right now, you're right. More and more talk in our industry is about celebrating creativity again. And I think that's only a good thing. But of course, powered by all these great data smarts and this technology, will just mean that we can actually do more exciting things moving forward as a result of it.
Paddy Affleck is UK CEO of Havas Media Group. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today.
Anytime, anytime.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader podcast. This episode was edited by our production partners, Trisonic. You can find and listen to all our episodes on our website at themedialeader.co.uk or wherever you get your podcasts. But just remember, please do subscribe to be notified when we release our next episode. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm editor Omar Oakes. Our executive producer is Jack Benjamin. See you next time.